Hello and welcome to episode 460 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' bi-weekly podcast of many topics. I am your host, Zach Wilkerson, and today we are here to talk about one of the golden ages of RPGs, and that is the 1990s. And we're putting together our top 10 list of 90s RPGs. And before we get into that, let me introduce the panel, starting with you, Aleks.
Hello.
And Jimmy.
Greetings.
And at this point, making illustrious return doesn't seem to work anymore because you're on these shows a lot. But hi, it's Alana.
Oh, hi. Hi, Zach.
So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for stepping in for us, Alana. Wes was supposed to be here, but they had a family emergency. So we miss you, Wes, if you're listening. But I guess Alana will do instead.
I don't even have a response to that. Like, I agree with you. I feel like Wes would be better, but hopefully I am...
You're ruining the joke. Stop.
Come on. I hope I'm representing Wes's interests too. I feel like them and I have a similar-ish taste. So.
Well, based on your number one, I know you're representing Zach's interests.
Whole lists are pretty different outside of that.
Yeah, for sure.
The way that we always put these together, just so you know, listeners, is that each of the individual panelists, we submit our personal top 10s. And then we take those top 10s, we kind of give each one a number score. Like sort of 10 is 1. The only one that's different is that I give 11 points to one. It's something Solosi always did because I think like number 1 is really special. So it gets that extra point. And then we combine them all together. And then we get our Retro Encounter top 10 90s RPGs. And one of the things that I think is interesting about this too is that we've done top 10 Super Nintendo ones, actually twice technically. And the very first one, just so you know, listeners, was an April Fool's joke, and it actually totally fooled me for the first 15 minutes because they put Chrono Trigger at number 10, and I was like, that's not right. And then as they were going, eventually I realized it. But we also have done a PS1 one. And so obviously we've had different panelists on each one, but also it feels like we're kind of combining those two in an interesting way. Maybe it's just like low-hanging fruit here, but I just thought it would be fun to talk about our top 10. But before we do that, we also want to kind of highlight some games that just missed the list. Maybe they were on our personal lists. We really wanted to highlight how awesome they were, but we weren't able to do it because they didn't quite make our top 10. So before we do that, we're just going to do some shout outs to some games that we want to talk about that came out in the 90s. And one other thing before we get to that, there are some games that may be on here that did not get released in the West in the 90s, but that were released in Japan or somewhere else in the 90s and got a similar enough version that we thought it was fair to put it on the list if we've played that version. So if you're confused by a couple of these, that might be why. So anyway, we'll get started here. Who wants to get us started by talking about one of their shout outs, one of their runner-ups, a game that you wish had made the list?
I can go.
Do it.
So my shout out goes out to Pokemon Red and Blue, first generation. I put it on my list. I know it's not, the greatest RPG just by that standard alone, but just for the fact of the impact that it had at the time, it was really a worldwide phenomenon. And everything it's spawned ever since. Pokemon is, it's a huge thing even for people that don't play RPGs or even video games. Everybody knows what Pokemon is, and I just think the influence alone, and how much it resonated with me when it came out. I was 12, just would have almost turned 13, I believe. So a very big time in my life as far as that goes. So yeah, shout out to original Pokemon.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a game that deserves a shout out. I'm no longer the level of Pokemon fan that I was as a child, but I still really appreciate the times I had with Pokemon. Red and Blue, specifically Red, was my first Game Boy game. I just found like a Game Boy Color at a garage sale way back when, and there was also just Pokemon Red and like Zelda Oracle of Seasons there, and like I got all those for like $5 or something. And that was like the beginning of my love of handhelds, and Pokemon was a blast of an experience as a kid. I think I was like 9 years old or something at that point, and my brother even got me this like physical like Pokédex thing, so like pen and paper that I'd fill in like as I was catching Pokemon. So had a really, really memorable experience with that. And yeah, even though I think I grew out of Pokemon a little bit, I 100% still understand the appeal.
Yeah, there's like I don't think I would be as into RPGs without Pokemon either. It was pretty much my first one, specifically yellow version, and then I went back and played blue, and then Gold and Silver, which the remakes of are my favorite Pokemon game. I'm up and down on the series nowadays because it's just so inconsistent, and there are things I love and there are things I don't love. But like, I don't think you can ever take Pokemon out of an RPG experience for me. Like it's always going to be part of that like growing path of my in my eyes. And yeah, like it's Pokemon is like the most well-known RPG franchise in the world just because even if people don't think of it as an RPG first, it absolutely is because it's like massive. So the influence it's had worldwide is just kind of phenomenal, and the fact that it's like more bigger than ever before really is kind of wild. So yeah, good shout out.
Yeah, I think that the if we were doing a top 10 most influential RPGs, and there would be a lot of candidates from the 90s, right? I still think that you would have to put Red and Blue on the list. And I think that Pokemon, it's, in terms of, when I'm talking to my students nowadays, the one RPG that I know they've all at least heard of, but many of them are playing, is Pokemon. And even if they thought that Scarlet and Violet's body horror damage that it was doing to their televisions was too much, they still know what it is.
Hey, look,
And
the
so
Switch 2's gonna fix that. Don't worry.
I don't think that I don't think anyone can fix Game
I-
Freak at this point, but
True. Very true.
but in all sincerity, I've never played one. I should, but it totally belongs in a conversation about the best 90s RPGs. Who wants to get rolling with the next one?
I'll shout out mine. And this is a game that I put on my list without at all expecting it to make the final list because it's been unavailable in English basically until a year ago when it got uh, an amazingly done fan translation, like a fan translation that I think had like 10 years of work put into it, and that really just tried to pay attention to the nuances of this game's writing, which is really good. And that game is Linda Cubed again, which was a bit of a, I wouldn't say phenomenon in Japan when it came out, but it definitely made some waves. And specifically, I know it got the attention of a lot of like the game directors we really celebrate like these days. I think both Hideo Kojima and Yoko Taro shouted this game out as influential to them, and that's some high praise from some really, really great people. And so just I'll say a little bit about this game just because I'm not sure if anybody knows about it. It was originally released on PC Engine, and the PS1 port, which is the Linda Cubed again, came out like a couple years later. But it definitely still looks like a PC Engine game. Like you wouldn't appreciate what is so interesting about this game just looking at screenshots. The graphics look kind of bad, to be honest. But this is just like an extremely creative game that represents a lot about what I specifically love in a lot of 90s RPGs, which is basically taking that kind of formulaic design established by Dragon Quest in terms of like turn-based battles and an overworld that you explore and whatnot, and just creatively iterating on that to create a very distinct experience within those constraints. And basically, what you do in Linda Cute is that the world is a meteor's heading towards the world, about to wipe out everybody on it, including animals and humans. And you are a hunter who's basically been taken on to with along with your partner Linda, basically acquire one of every male and female animal on the planet and bring it towards this ark that just like appeared out of nowhere. It's like very much hearkening to like this biblical story of Noah's Ark, which is like a really creative concept. And the way you recruit animals is it's kind of like Pokemon-ish, except in a much more darker, weirder, and twisted way, where you go around. You have to make sure you only defeat monster or animals by like a small margin to be able to capture them rather than slaughtering them. And just the whole world has this mix of like hunter-gatherer lifestyle and uh, like sci-fi futurism. It's like a really, really creatively done world. And beyond that, there's also like a time limit where there's 8 years from the beginning of a playthrough, where the meteor is about to crash. So you have to uh, basically recruit all the animals you can, and also see like the sort of linear story that develops alongside it through. And there are three playthroughs, kind of similar to what the Nier games ultimately have. There's like an A, B, and C scenario that each have different like quotas for how many animals you have to recruit by the end, while also seeing through that linear narrative. I know I'm getting into a long description here. I just want to shout out what a creative game this is, and if anything I said sticks out as interesting, I highly highly recommend checking this game out. It is one of the most unique and interesting RPGs I've played from this whole decade, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I had basically I maybe heard about it like very vaguely, but you told me about it. I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago. I don't remember whenever you played it, and you're like, "This is amazing. You got to check it out." I was looking into it, and I was like, "This is like I can't even really see how this is all going to work together." And I still, even having read it and listening to you, I'm like, I still don't really understand how this game is going to make sense. And that intrigues me. The fact that it has it like three playthroughs, I love that. Yeah, it's a game that is on my radar, and I maybe even this summer I'll give it a shot.
I wanted to like recommend an interview with a website called Read Only Memo, run by Wes Fenlon, and he's done an interview with the two people who worked on the translation,
Yep.
or the translator and the coder, and there's some really interesting details about like how a lot of the mysticism has to like be changed or like removed, and like because it doesn't translate properly, or because like this game is like trying to do something and it's like funny but not funny, and it just plays with like genre really interestingly. So yeah, I'd love to give it a go, because like the thing with like the time limit, I think of like Majora's Mask obviously and other RPGs, and I've even seen it billed as the anti RPG, which is very similar to Moon, which was about a year or two afterwards or around the same time. So yeah, no, it's just totally fascinating to me. The rights are in limbo right now. Like they sold it to a company, but it's like co-owned by like three different developers. So maybe one day we'll get to try it properly. But a fan translation that's that good is easily going to get me to have a go at some point.
And I'm not gonna lie, I hadn't heard of it until now. So
Appreciate the honesty. Yeah, it just seems like 100% my jam. And did you like it better than Moon, Alex?
Um, Personally, yes.
Okay.
I really like a lot of what Moon did, but Moon frustrated me in ways that this game didn't. I think what this game is doing structurally is just really interesting and kept me pretty engaged the entire time. Even if like some of the combat is like kind of underdeveloped, and things like that, but just the creativity here was enough to just keep me completely captivated the entire time.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
What about you, Alana? What do you want to shout out?
Something way less interesting, but in a similar way, was a massively well-known fan translation for a very long time until it actually got an English release in 2019. I want to say, yeah. So Trials of Mana, or Seiken Densetsu 3, and this is like not like a lot of the games that I really truly love, in that it's more of a gameplay perspective that I love it for than a story perspective, because it's not like doing anything massively interesting narratively. But if anyone knows me, Secret of Mana is probably like one of the most influential RPGs in my like back catalog. I just love what Trials of Mana does with the gameplay. I love that it plays around the class system, and that class system is super fun as well. I like that all six characters have very distinctive personalities, even though this is a game from 1995 where the story is like tertiary to everything else. And I like the amount of like freedom the game gives you, but it also still like keeps you on rails to a degree. So it's not like you can just like go anywhere. You can, but you're doing something specific in those locations. But I just think it's like a really fun expansion of what Secret of Mana did. But ultimately, like, I think that and Final Fantasy V have like totally influenced like the way that like job and class systems work in RPGs, and just the amount of fun and breakability in them as well. So I love Trials of Mana. It's like super super fun, and I really highly recommend people play it. It's super short too, like 15-20 hours a playthrough, and there are multiple playthroughs because you can pick different parties. So there you go.
Yeah, it's like ultra replayable.
Hmm.
I remember playing the game, I think, basically twice in a row because I just wanted to see. You
Yeah,
get like a potentially three different final dungeons between the what is it, six main
yeah,
characters,
yes,
and
that's
like
right.
a
Yeah.
unique like prologue for each one. So yeah, any playthrough you can really see some like different things, and then there's a lot of gameplay experimentation as you were describing with like the class system and who you choose as like your supporting characters. So yeah, just like in terms of like just raw gameplay in like a 90s action RPG, I don't think you can do much better than Trials of Mana. Like this game rules. I had some really, really good times with it, even just yeah, playing it back when it was only known as Seiken Densetsu 3.
Yeah, I think the Mana series as a whole, it's it's almost polarizing in a way. People, I think a lot of people have kind of soured on Secret of Mana over the years, but I still love it, and I love
Mhm.
Trials of Mana too. And it's kind of nice because with some of the recent re-releases, which aren't, some of them are good and some of them not so good, but still that series is kind of making a comeback in the RPG lexicon is always a good thing.
Yeah, we really need it. It's like a really good B list series, I think. I actually haven't played the remake of Trials of Mana. And one of the reasons I haven't played it is because it's not multiplayer. So, and the same with like Visions of Mana, the newest one. Like it's hard to like sit down
We
and
own
play
them
it.
both.
We do own them both, but they're not multiplayer.
I
So,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, the remake of Trials of Mana does look great, and I'm sure I'd enjoy it. But one of my favorite things about the original is just it's one of the best looking like pixel art games ever.
Oh
Still,
yeah.
I think it looks amazing. Like it's
Uh,
up there with like Chrono Trigger, FF6, Terranigma in terms of that really nice Super Nintendo pixel art.
mhm.
It's interesting too because, like, to me, I tried to go back and play Secret of Mana after playing Trials of Mana because the first time I played it was when it was released back in, was it 2019, right? Should have dropped at E3.
Oh, the collection, yeah.
Yeah. And then afterwards, I tried to go back and play Secret of Mana, which in some ways, I think I there are things about Secret of Mana that I prefer. I think the music is better.
Yes.
I just like the vibes better.
Yep.
Um, but the gameplay is so much worse. Like that,
It really
it's
is.
actually really hard to go back to it. And it's not like the gameplay in Trials of Mana is like any great shakes, really. It's pretty simple, but it's simple in a way that I really appreciate. And that's why, like, I played the demo for Trials of Mana, the 3D or remake, and I'm sure it's good. But I tried it and I'm like, like you're kind of trying to do some of the same stuff, but there's like some, like, you're showing me AoE things, and it just felt like really easy. And sure, Trials of Mana by the end, like, I think I one shotted the boss because my build was perfect.
Mhm.
But it kind of blended system and action gameplay in a way that I thought was really really cool. Which, if we want to talk about a game that does not have great gameplay,
Yeah.
I will shout out my game, which is a game that I will admit I have only played the PSP remake of because it was never released in the West. In the PlayStation 1 version wasn't. And that is Persona 2 Innocent Sin. I actually put this personally seventh on my overall list, which is amazing because it is one of the least fun experiences I have had playing a video game. The gameplay is miserable. The dungeons are interminable and they're boring, and the gameplay, once you understand it, is, while it's interminable and boring, is also very breakable and easy. And I think I played like 15 hours of it in one day because I did it for Retro Encounter many years ago now.
Oh, you did. You like
It,
narrated the whole thing
and I was
too. I
narrating it
remember.
over Slack the whole time, and I
Yep.
finished like 45 minutes before recording part two. But the story of Persona 2 Innocent Sin is exactly what I wish Persona would still do,
Yep.
which is tell like a real story that is really about the concept of Persona and the philosophical ideas. Now, Persona 3 still does it to some degree, and you can hear Aleks and Alana and I talk about that. But just the storytelling and the way that it deals with trauma and the way that it deals with teenagers in a way that feels legitimate and also respects them in a way that I think a lot of RPGs don't. It's working on to me such an elevated level and also such a freaking weird level, where you've got all the stuff with Hitler, however that was localized here. Like it sounds like a game that absolutely should not work on paper, and from a gameplay perspective, it doesn't. It's fascinating that we went from this to then what Persona becomes, where gameplay is the thing. But the storytelling here is just so mature, and I don't want to say too much more about it because if you haven't played Persona 2 Innocent Sin, go do it. Maya is amazing. I wish she wasn't silent in Eternal Punishment because she's so good in Innocent Sin. Yeah, and I like Eternal Punishment a lot as well, but for me, like that core cast of teenagers and just what the title really means, it's beautiful. It's chef's kiss. Loved it.
It is amazing. Yeah, I had it 10th on my list. And the only reason was because of the gameplay, but like narratively, it's like a top 5 RPG with Eternal Punishment as the package. Like, I couldn't put it down. Basically, like when I started seeing the cogs spinning, and I was like, oh, I think I see what this is doing, and then I started like connecting the dots with certain things, and I was like, oh, I was like, so this is what everybody actually means when they say Persona 2 is the real best one. Because it is really the best one. Like, yeah, it's phenomenal. Like, we talk about pastiche a lot with a Persona, modern Persona at least, and I feel like this really kind of understands what Persona and the actual, like, young and freed texts do, and also tells you it in a way that's like not unsubtle, but like it doesn't like hammer you around the head with it in a way that's like pastiche, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like more written like a 90s RPG. It doesn't have quite as much of those more modern anime-ish vibes you get in a lot of
Mm.
the later Personas and a lot of the later JRPGs. It has much more like grounded naturalistic tone even when it gets absolutely wild with things like Jungian concepts and Hitler. Also really enjoyed Persona 2 Innocent Sin. Have yet to play Eternal Punishment, but we'll probably get around to that soon as I just couldn't go right into it because I felt like I needed a break from that gameplay. I don't know if I hated it as much as Zach described. I thought it still had some decent elements, but it just felt like so conceptually half baked that it's not the best.
I've never played it. I was late to the Persona series, so I actually started with 5, but I'm working my way backwards and I'm almost done with 3 now, so I'll get there eventually because I do want to experience it. It's become really one of my favorite um RPG series, and I'm really kind of mad at myself in a way that it took me so long to kind of jump on the Persona bandwagon, but yeah, sounds fascinating.
Are you playing Reload?
Actually, no, I'm playing
Oh, okay.
I'm playing Portable on my Switch right now,
Okay.
so yeah.
Well, regardless, I will say that it's going to be a challenging transition in terms of the
Yes.
gameplay. But yeah, the storytelling, just like see it through. It was a game that I had to like force myself to play, but then I loved it when I was playing it. It's weird. It
No,
is
that's the best way to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
fascinating that it's on my list at all. So yeah. So those are our shout outs. But now let's get into our top 10. But we actually have a fair number of ties in our top 10. And I will say, I am pretty happy with the way things turned out in our top 10. There's a lot of different things represented. Of course, some people call us JRPG fan for a reason. You're going to see maybe a little more J in the RPG here. But there's a lot of variety. And speaking of that, so we have actually a 3-way tie for 8th with 3 games that are wildly different.
Right.
And like just insanely different. And I want to, and just actually no particular order as I was putting this list together. And I'm just panelists. I'm just going to go down the list. So let's start with a game that I have never played, but after reading about it and respecting Aleks as much as I do, and also having heard about it over the years, I feel like I need to play. So our first number 8 is Planescape Torment. Aleks, take it away.
Yeah, so I also, like many of the people who are both writers and readers of the site, love JRPGs, and that was really my portal into RPGs was just 90s JRPGs, turn-based RPGs. And it took me a couple of tries before I finally got quote unquote got Western RPGs, and one of those Ones that made it really, really click for me and open my eyes and make me see a potential for a different kind of RPG was Planescape Torment. Because as much as the JRPGs around the time excelled at just ease of play and pacing and just aesthetics, and getting you into it pretty easily. Planescape Torment definitely has still some Western RPG jank that's par for the course in the 90s, even though it's not even quite as bad as some other games around that time. Um, but oh my god, the writing and the world building and the imagination behind this world are like it's set a new golden standard for RPG writing in particular, I'd say. That is maybe like matched by Obsidian's output, like Knights of the Old Republic 2 and Fallout New Vegas. But that I don't think
Same dude
is
worked on all 3 of those games.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. But hasn't really been surpassed until like Disco Elysium, and I think Disco Elysium even a lot of aspects of it reminded me of Planescape Torment, and I mean that as a huge, huge compliment to this game. Obviously, you have to deal with a little bit more jank in terms of the combat. It's got that real time with pause that games like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale also had. Those other isometric Infinity Engine games, but where Planescape Torment doesn't excel quite as well in that category, like just walking around this world, meeting like an extremely eclectic and awesome and uniquely written cast of companions, is just oh my god, it really stuck out to me. Like you start off just waking up in a mortuary with like this talking skull, just a floating talking skull talking to you, and he's kind of your buddy or your Kim Kitsuragi throughout the game, if you will. And then there's just like just other wildly conceived companions like this Gith Sarai whose sword like is formed by his like will, like its appearance and its color and its properties, or like this perpetually burning guy who's become like a conduit for this other like elemental plane of fire that the world just plays with like notions of like space and time in really creative ways that other RPGs simply were not doing. And other like fiction often can't really do as well as this. So yeah, Planescape Torment just for being incredibly written and an incredibly unique to this day vibe. I'm very, very glad we got it onto this list.
I am too. I've never played it, but I've been like so aware of it and so like conscious of, you know, amazing writing in video games, and Planescape Torment is always there for like its characterization of like the cast. Like the main character, the nameless one, often gets like mentioned in a lot of like fantastic like lead characters or even like endings as well. Like I unfortunately do know how this game ends, even though I've like never played it. But there are like so many ways you can get to that ending as well, and so many ways
Mhm.
you can like that journey, like how you can like make your way through that game. And I've long been fascinated by it and always wanted to play it and never really made the time for it. So I think that hearing you like gush about it along with all the other people I've heard gush about it just makes me want to pick it up again like even more.
Yeah, I've started Planescape Torment a couple of times, and I think I have a hard time with um, whether it's my ADHD or whatever. Just the amount of dialogue has always just kind of made me fall off of it. But like Alana, I already know like the ending and everything, and it is. I've actually got it loaded on my Steam Deck, so I plan on giving it yet another shot at some point. Um, but yeah, it's one of those games that is just routinely talked about as you know just the elite amongst storytelling in RPGs, and so I'm glad that it made the list here.
That is a really good PSA of just like it's a game that you got to approach like when you got to pick it up when you want to read a book rather than
Mhm.
like play a
So
game
it's like
because
Disco Elysium.
yeah,
Oh.
Mm.
the amount of text is there's so much to read, but it's so good.
Yeah, the fact that so I was reading about this because I obviously have been aware of it. Apparently, the antagonist is really fascinating in this game,
Mhm.
um, and the amount of sort of choice. It all sounds great. Like I don't love D&D combat, just because I can't get my head around it because I'm stupid. But It's like the reason that I still have not played Baldur's Gate 3, which I know I need to do, but it's because it just overwhelms me. But I've heard the combat is not, there's not a ton of it here. That actually makes me want to play it more, because all those dialogue systems, and that all sounds like very much like what inspired elements of Disco Elysium. And we all know here, and everybody who's ever played RPGs should go play Disco Elysium because it's so good. And if it's like that, I want to play it.
Right, and there's like in the same vein as like early Fallout, like there are ways like, and then like Alex said, you don't have to fight everything. You can just like talk your way out of stuff or like manipulate certain things. So there's that element to it as well.
Yeah, I would recommend anybody interested in this game to just in the character builder just go all in on like wisdom, intelligence, and charisma, just so you can do a
Yes.
lot more talking and a lot less janky fighting.
Speaking of jank, hey, yeah.
Hey.
Although, like at the time, it didn't seem janky. At the time, it was revelatory. So at the next number 8 for us, and first for the record, some people are going to complain. I know it's going to happen. You're going to say this is not an RPG. I don't care. It's on our coverage. It qualifies. So the end. And that is Zelda: Ocarina of Time, one of the defining games of the late '90s, especially in terms of 3D games, and also the single only Zelda 3D Zelda game that I have completed. So that tells you what I think of it, which means I enjoyed it quite a bit. I was happy to see it on our list. But Jimmy, you placed it real high on your list, which is why it made it. It's also both Planescape Torment and Zelda Ocarina of Time got a single vote, but they were both number 2. Obviously, Alex voted number 2 for Planescape Torment, and Jimmy, Ocarina of Time. So talk to us about Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned that it's the only 3D Zelda game that you've ever beaten. The only other one that I've beaten is Majora's Mask. So it's kind of funny because over time, I've become kind of like, I used to think I was a huge Zelda fan, and then I just couldn't get into like Twilight Princess, and then I couldn't even get into Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. And I've come to realize that I don't think I'm necessarily a Zelda fan. I think I'm an Ocarina of Time fan. Um, it's probably the game I put the most time into in the 90s. It was really that and the THQ wrestling games for the Nintendo 64 were like the only games I had
Dude,
for
those
that
games
system.
It was
ripped.
so
Oh,
good.
They were so good.
awesome.
They're still the best wrestling games of all time. But
Oh,
continue. I'm sorry.
absolutely. But yeah, those two games and Zelda were like basically all I ever played for the Nintendo 64, and I just loved every bit of it. And it just the music and so many of the scenes. I don't know another game that invokes that strong feeling of nostalgia in me as Ocarina of Time does. Um, and so it's such a big part of that decade for me. And yeah, I do understand it's not exactly an RPG, but it's far and away my favorite Zelda game, and probably it's definitely my favorite Nintendo 64 game, and maybe my favorite Nintendo game period. So that's why it went so high on my list.
It's not surprising because, like, I think about like Ocarina of Time is I'm more of a 2D Zelda person than a 3D Zelda person. But for a long time, Ocarina of Time was my favorite 3D Zelda because I mean, yeah, I don't really know why. It just like there's like Majora's Mask has like the vibe and like such a unique feeling to it that I love, but I don't love the dungeons. I don't really love other things that it's trying to do. But Ocarina of Time is like, I mean, I was like 5 years old when this game came out, and I just remember like walking into the bed, like my brother's room or something, and he was like talking to the Deku Tree, and I like freaked out. I was like terrified of it. And there's like this like underlaying like current of like uncomfortableness and fear, and there's like the twist, obviously, like, oh, you can be adult Link now because the power, like time travel and stuff like that. And I think like Ocarina of Time like revolutionized so much 3D gameplay. Like I think it's one of the earliest games to use like a lock-on feature. It's got like the running jumps where you don't jump with a button, you run when you get close to an edge. The camera angles, the combat even for the time is very revolutionary. Like it wouldn't so many open world action games would not exist without Zelda, and like Ocarina of Time did to action games what Breath of the Wild did to open world games, right? So it's easily and like it's still held in like such high regard as well. Like you often get like the best video games of all time, and while I think Breath of the Wild has probably surpassed it at this point in terms of being mentioned, Ocarina of Time still gets mentioned in those lists as like number 1 or 2, and it's like it's kind of amazing. This game is 26 years old now, 27 years old, and it's just like totally like revolutionized the gaming industry as a whole. And yeah, it's not my favorite Zelda anymore, but I do love it. Like it's just got a very particular feeling, and I think we would be in a very different space now if Zelda did not take off the way it did on the N64.
Yeah, and like speaking of its revolutionariness and its influence, I don't think like Dark Souls would exist in the same way without Ocarina of Time.
Nope.
Like Dark Souls' like targeting system is very much like an evolution of Ocarina of Time's like Z targeting, and then just like taken to like a whole different kind of place. But you could see a lot of Zelda influence in the Souls games, I think, and that all starts with Ocarina of Time and just like the more vibey elements of it, and like even like those more interesting like thematic aspects you were describing, Alana, with like going from like just being like an innocent kid who was living in an isolated village, having to suddenly become an adult and deal with all this freaky crap like the Shadow Temple,
Oh
um,
man.
is just it made Link a much more interesting character than he had ever been previously, and then Majora's Mask just built on that in its own interesting way, and Majora's Mask became my favorite Zelda over time.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you told my 10-year-old self that I would make a top 10 90s games list and exclude Ocarina of Time, he would cry. But I I do ultimately just like a couple of 3D Zeldas a bit more than this at this point, even though like I still respect the hell out of this game and would basically be down to replay it anytime.
I came very close to putting A Link to the Past on my
Me
list.
too.
That's my
Yeah.
favorite 2D Zelda game
Yeah, same.
still. So, yeah, I was very, very, very close, but ultimately it was like a themes gameplay thing. But Ocarina of Time is probably thematically my favorite Zelda game, just because of the way it blends that like adult childhood, scary, not scary stuff.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that doesn't get enough credit for is the way that it paces itself out. Like it's like open then close then open then close, and like you're sort of funneled certain places, but then you have options of going over here. And in a 3D game at the time, like it was mind boggling.
Uh-huh.
Like that and Mario 64 drop around the same time, and they're both just like, to me at the time, like, oh my gosh, these are like the best games ever made.
Uh-huh.
And obviously they've been surpassed since, but I think that even outside of the jank or outside of the things that have been surpassed with Ocarina of Time, I think the reason why it is still the only 3D one that I have finished is because it knows how to pace itself out in a way that doesn't overwhelm me or that doesn't bore me, like Twilight Princess did, or like Skyward Sword does. Whereas Breath of the Wild, I'm like, well, I can go around that cliff, I guess, but what the hell's the point? I can just go play Xenoblade Cross instead if I just want an open world. So like, to me, it also is like, it feels very much like the 2D ones in terms of the way it's paced, and I think you can see that influence. It's one of the reasons why I like it as much as I do.
Yeah.
Speaking of pacing,
Oh
oh,
boy.
my transitions are killing it today.
They're really good. This is a good one. Whoo.
So let's speak. Let's get to like our bread and butter. Now we haven't really talked about like a JRPG, like a JRPG ass JRPG, but we're about to, and that is the final number 8. So we've had 3 number 8s in a row. They're all tied. I know we're talking about them in order, but it was just kind of random. And that is Xenogears, which is a game that I will admit, so it did not follow my list, but I actually still considered it, despite the fact that I've only played Xenogears once. I played it when it came out. I was like 13. And let me tell y'all, I did not understand what the hell was happening in this game.
No way.
And I got to the end and I was like, Krillion's so cool. But why? I don't know. And I liked the other guy with the glasses because he hit things so hard. Satan. But Xenogears is a game, like, obviously is a big Xeno fan. Like, I need to go back and play, and my memories of it were just like, this game is fascinating. But the person who placed it highest on their list, number 3, was Alana. So go ahead and talk to us about Xenogears.
Oh boy, JRPG is a great way of putting it, because like it's also like the most ambitious narrative game in the genre for a very long time, I think. Like, I think about, like, the controversy of getting Xenogears, like, localized, and think about all the religious iconography it uses, all of the, like, the amount of, like, death and the amount of, like, mental health that admittedly it, like, deals with very poorly, but, like, at the time, it feels, like, very, very, like, very new and very, like, "Oh my goodness, like, this game is, like, willing to go places that, like, other games haven't been or won't go." And, like, Xenogears is, like, it's almost too big, right? Like, I think that, Tetsuya Takahashi is, like, shooting for the moon with this game, and he misses. But I kinda love that he misses because, like, it is just going for something that is, like, so beyond, like, what any other video game had gone for at that point. At the times that it's, like, very obvious and very over the top and very, like, "You will remember this." Like, you will see all the religious iconography, and you will see that this is going for this, like, message. But, like, ultimately, Xenogears is, like, just so ambitious that I love it. Like, I love how much it is trying to do and how it doesn't do all of that. To play in like, interestingly, it's not the most fun RPG to play. Like, there are some platforming sections that aren't great. The mech combat is really fun, but it's annoying because they all work off of fuel, and so you have to refuel them. The combat is kind of like you have to do button inputs like a fighting game, and the game doesn't really tell you how to do them, so you have to like remember them. So it's not always fun, but I don't really care because like it's like a full fat RPG. Like there's no like there's so much stuff in it, but it's so linear as well that like it feels like everything has a purpose. Um it's like messy in ways that I really appreciate, and the characters are all pretty good. Like Citon is my favorite character, and then I love Ellie too.
Mm.
There's just like so many layers to the game, and I love that like it was gonna be 6 video games, but it's not because Takahashi didn't make money from it, and Square were like, "Nope, you can go now." And so he was like, "Screw you guys, I'm gonna go make Xenosaga," and then told Bandai Namco, "Screw you guys, I'm gonna go make Xenoblade." And Takahashi is just like, I haven't played Xenosaga, but like I think if all the video game like creators or developers, I think like Monolith Soft and the people that went with Takahashi to form Monolith Soft from Square, like get the philosophy of what I'm looking for in like narratives. And they're never like super serious either. Like they always know how to balance it. So yeah, I think Xenogears like makes it very high on my list just because it's like so ambitious, and like I love what it's trying to do, even if it doesn't do everything very well. It's so I just haven't like since I played it. I think I played it for retro for the first time in 2016. So I played it before Xenoblade 2 as well, and I still think about it like pretty regularly. Just like the end of Disc 1 and the beginning of Disc 2 very specifically is just like etched into me.
Yeah, that was just a great description of what makes this game interesting despite all its flaws. And I also feel very similarly to what Zach described, where um, I was highly considering it for making my top 10. It just got cut as like one of the 3 games that could have easily made it into my list, and just didn't. But I love this game. I also played it around like 15. I feel like it was a great age to experience this wackiness and this angstiness. With that said, even though the the impressions that it left on me from like specific moments are really etched into my mind, specific details of the plot, I could not tell you what happened in this game either.
Oh no, me either. I'm not sure if I could tell you if I played it now. But like you're right. Like there are certain like images, like just like Faye sitting on that chair
Uh-huh.
in Disc
Mhm.
2, which controversial opinion, Disc 2 is better than Disc 1 because I don't actually have to play the game.
It's
Um,
agreed. Correct.
like and some stuff with Satan and like that final cutscene, like those are things that are just I'm like I don't remember any of your motivations, any of it, but damn, do I remember that stuff.
Yeah, I also just similarly moments where like the screen would go like red and the sound would get off, and like either Ellie or Faye is having some kind of psychological episode, like I remember just feeling those moments so viscerally when I played this game, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like exceptionally well done in that aspect.
Yeah, it's sometimes really silly too. Like, I can't help but laugh every time Graf turns up and he's like, "I am Graf, seeker of power," and something like that. And then there's like the people on the Thames or the Thomas. I actually don't know whether you say like the River Thames or the Thomas, but the Men of the Sea. It just like there's so much going on. It's such a messy big band of rubber ball band of ideas that I can't help but love it.
Yeah, it's still snuck onto my list. I think,
Yay.
yeah, it's still my number 10. I just couldn't take it off because for a lot of the same reasons, just the impact it made on me, a lot of the big ideas. So interestingly, I when I was young, I actually grew up in a as a evangelical Christian household. So when I played this, a lot of the religious themes for me were kind of my first. Oh wow, this is neat that I'm seeing a completely different perspective on all this stuff that's hammered into me
Wow.
constantly, so and I was drawn to it because I've always been a huge fan of just mecha in general,
Mhm.
all the way back to Transformers. And my dad, I remember seeing my dad play Mech Warrior on the Super Nintendo, and I've just always been really big fan of anything to do with mecha. Even a game that comes up later in the list that incorporates some of that into it. But came for the mecha, and kind of left blown away by just the philosophy and the story. Whether it landed perfectly or not, it was just one of those things that made such an impact on me that I couldn't bring myself to take it off the list.
It is interesting because I think you and I are about the same age, Jimmy. Like the way that I didn't grow up in necessarily an evangelical household, but definitely like a very Christian household. And like Breath of Fire 2 for me was always the first one where I was like, oh, hey, you're kind of like saying religion's bad.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And
another
then
one, huh?
like Xenogears, I was like, oh, like you're really kind of you're going at it, aren't you? Um, and it's really interesting because I know that as an adult, I can go back and I'm like, well, these are like so obvious and over the top and whatever. I wouldn't say that about Xenogears, but Breath of Fire 2 probably coming soon to Retro Encounter. But it's just interesting the way that these stories had such an impact on us, and also the way that they adjusted the way that we think about things. And I think that people don't give video games enough credit for being able to do that with kids. And I think Xenogears, I mean, certainly is an example that can do that.
For sure. Yeah.
Anybody really like the platforming in Xenogears?
I don't think it's as bad as people think it is, but
Yeah,
then
me
I'm
neither.
also like I just have like a skill to get over like janky platforming. Like
Yeah,
I've
I mean, you've done all
yeah.
my platforming in Expedition 33, so I
That's
appreciate that.
true, yeah. And then I had to do it all myself, so goddamn.
I knew I was going to get that game in here. Coming soon to Random Encounter. Um, anyway, Alex said something a while ago where he said if you told him when he was a kid that Zelda Ocarina of Time would not make his top 10 90s RPGs, that he would have cried. The next game, which is not on my top 10 list, if you had told me when I was a kid wouldn't be
Mhm.
on my top 10 90s RPGs, I also would have cried. And some listeners are about to cry too. But this is our list, so get over it. And number 7 on our list, from the strength of a single vote, a number 1 vote, is Final Fantasy VII. And I'll get into the reasons why I didn't vote for it later, but I want to get on the hype train first and let Jimmy talk about why this is number 1 on his list.
Well, I'm actually kind of glad that it made 7. That's very fitting that it's the 7th
Yes.
of on our list. I still use 7 in a lot of my whenever I'm coming up with some kind of gamer tag or something like that. Like that's just the kind of influence that it has on me. So when I think of the number 7, I think of this game. So that's great, but it's still my favorite game. A lot of games have come close, but ultimately, Final Fantasy VII was the first real RPG I played, and it nothing has ever made that much of an impact on me. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced before that. A lot of the Super Nintendo RPGs that we'll talk about, I played later in life, so I kind of missed the boat on the Super Nintendo era of RPGs at the time because I just wasn't um, that into that genre when I was that age. And Final Fantasy VII is really when it all changed for me. Um, just so much about it. Just I I love the characters. I love Sephiroth. I love the story. Even obviously the flaws that it has there too. Just I just love it all, and I still play it regularly. I still prefer the original to the remake, which might not be the most popular opinion as far as that goes. I do enjoy the remake, but to me, I would still rather play the original. And yeah, it's still my favorite game, so it had to go number one for me, and I'm glad that it all evened out and made number 7 on the list.
I think it'd be a weird list without Final Fantasy VII, honestly. Like with Zelda and like we mentioned with Pokemon, like these are like some of the most influential games ever. And I think for me, like Final Fantasy VII is like not even like a top 5 favorite Final Fantasy. And maybe my hot take is that I think I prefer Rebirth to it, and I prefer Rebirth to most Final Fantasies at this point. But I think what makes Final Fantasy VII so incredible in my head is like this is like one of the first really political games I ever played. Like I think it like really influenced the way that I think about many things about like ecology and like eco-terrorism and like the way that you like anti-corporation. Like it is so very like it's so very like left and liberal and in so many different ways, and it also deals with a lot of things again in the same way of Xenogears, which Xenogears was almost Final Fantasy 7 too. Like it deals with like so many things that RPGs hadn't really dealt with, and it really felt like this was the first Final Fantasy game that we got in Europe. So that's like another big deal too. When I lived in the UK, it was like Final Fantasy 7, whereas 1 to 6, like they just didn't exist. They were just magazine prints and things like that. But Final Fantasy 7 was like I remember my brother playing it. My brother did not like turn-based RPGs and he loved it. And then my mom played it, and I played it when I was like 10 or 11, and I was like this is so different. And like that like diesel punk mixed with like you've got like mysticism and you've got like different cultures in ways that like RPGs it doesn't really fit the same template as so many other RPGs. Like you have this like singular metropolis that's also like the center of capitalism and also like evil corporations, and then you've got like these like very beautiful towns like Gongaga and Calm and um oh my goodness, Cosmo Canyon, and then you've got like just if there's like an iconic video game world to me, like Gaia written Final Fantasy VII is that. And also Materia is like quite fun to play around with. Like never used to like it as a kid, but I like the customization you have with it, and I like the breakability of it, which I think goes to just how fun it is to like mess around and max out those summons, even if those animations are unskippable and but they're very cool. They're very worth seeing through. So yeah, it would be a very very strange list without Final Fantasy VII, even if it's not like my personal favorite PS1 one or even in the top 5. It's still an incredible game.
Yeah, I grew up in a household where there were two absolute truths enforced by my older brother of 8 years, and those were that The Godfather is the best movie of all time, and that Final Fantasy VII is the best video game of all time.
This man, it sounds like a man after my own heart.
This is like you. It's like,
I mean, only one of those things is true
That's
now.
true, yes.
And I don't know if it's because of that I can't help but think of Final Fantasy VII as the godfather of video games, because
It's the truth.
It is.
it is, right? It's just like the technical innovation combined with like the artistic innovation, plus just the place it occupies in like our discourse on how we talk about like and think about like the greatest blank of all time. I think like Godfather is just a very easy and appropriate default for best movie of all time, and I feel the same way about Final Fantasy VII, even though it ultimately didn't make my list, and I do have some issues with going back to it. It's still like, oh my god, I do just love this game, and I'm happy to have it on this list. And I'm still just a huge sucker for like that PS1 style of fixed camera angles combined with like the pre-rendered backgrounds. I think it's just there's such a beauty to that in all of the PS1 games that utilize that technique, from like Resident Evil to the Final Fantasies, that I would just be happy to go back to any of those games just to look at them, because I
Mhm.
think there was really something artistically unique going on there that we haven't really seen emulated in quite the same way since. So it's a very 90s RPG also, as a pick there, like in a way that like I feel like the Super Nintendo and like 2D RPGs came back in a big way with indies, and what something like Final Fantasy VII was doing in terms of its like artistic aesthetics, if you want to call it that, is still just something that is locked onto the PS1. So I still really appreciate this game despite
Yeah.
any criticisms I can have about it.
I keep waiting for the indie scene to start doing that.
Yeah.
To start doing like sort of those pre-rendered backgrounds. But for me, actually, the pre-rendered backgrounds are part of the problem. So I'm gonna be a little negative here. Because I can't see where I'm going. Even with like the little like turning on the little like indicators, like I can't see it. Maybe it's because I'm colorblind, but like I really struggle with all these like gray and washed out areas to figure out where I'm going. Because I reviewed the Switch port back in, I don't know, 2019 for the site. And I gave it an 83, and I was like, I can't believe I just gave this game an 83. Like Final Fantasy VII, what am I doing? But I think that, in terms of what it does well, I do not think there is a game that does the big moments better. And I mean
Mhm.
that very sincerely. Like these big, huge set pieces of FMVs, even if they don't look good now, they still seem so epic. Like Final Fantasy VII, like you say The Godfather, I say epic. Like it's so big, but also I think sometimes its bigness overwhelms it. I think the character writing is not very strong because localization is so crappy. And I think that the last time I played it, like I was impressed still by like sort of like these larger than life figures, but like I felt like I didn't really know people the same way. Whereas, and I hate to say this, but one of the other things that works against it in my world now is remake and rebirth, where these characters are brought to life in these really significant ways. And so I can see and appreciate the outline that was created by Seven, but to me, it's been surpassed by at least rebirth. Remake, I'm up and down on, but um, so that's why it's hard for me to really evaluate it. But when it first came out, like it changed me. I had been playing RPGs before, but nothing really impacted me the way this game did when it came out. Nothing. All right, so we are talking about maybe the most well-known video game franchise or RPG franchise in the West, outside of maybe Pokemon, I guess. But let's talk about what I think is the defining RPG franchise in Japan, which is Dragon Quest. And so we're going to move on to number 6 on our list, which is Dragon Quest 5. Now, first of all, I'm going to admit I'm cheating a little bit here. So I put this number 2 on my list, but I have not played to completion or even close to completion, to be honest with you, the original Super Nintendo or Super Famicom version of Dragon Quest 5. But Dragon Quest 5 on the DS is one of my all-time favorite games. And the thing that matters to me about those two versions is the story. There and also some of the collecting and stuff like that, which is also true. There are some things they add to the DS version which I think make it better. But I think even given that, number 2 on my list for top 90s RPGs, and Dragon Quest 5 is just to me it's a revelation. Dragon Quest 4, which made Jimmy's list but doesn't make our overall list, introduces storytelling as in character as an important thing in the Dragon Quest franchise. But Dragon Quest 5 to me just blows that out of the water
Mhm.
with just like this stunning sort of 3-part story about you as a child, you as a teen, you as an adult, looking at sort of the consequences of all the things that have happened to you over the course of time. And we talked earlier with Xenogears about like images that are just like seared in your memory. And I won't give away context too much because it's a late game thing, but there's like a sequence where like the main characters are in, or the main character is in stone, like he's been turned into stone, and you see like time moving over the course of that time. And I still think it's one of the most stunning sequences in video games.
Mhm.
And adding all this really interesting storytelling and this really emotional storytelling on top of the systems of Dragon Quest. I still love the systems of Dragon Quest. I still love the simplicity of those systems. But there's also that twist now, too, right? Where you get to recruit monsters. And some of the monsters you recruit are freaking monsters. They are the ones you want in your party. They are very strong. This predates Pokemon, where you're recruiting monsters. You get that golem and you're good and you're set until the end. You somehow manage to get that dragon at the very end, which is a 1-on-128 join. That's awesome. The heal slime early on is excellent. So I love the recruiting element. It gives you just enough where it doesn't overwhelm it. Whereas like with Pokemon, the whole point is the recruiting. Whereas here, recruiting is part of that system. And I think it's really, really good. And I think it's done extremely well. But at the end of the day, for me, it boils down to the storytelling and doing it somehow while maintaining the simplicity of Dragon Quest, while also hitting these extremely intensely emotional beats that I think have not been surpassed in the series. And it's still my favorite Dragon Quest game, even with 11 and 8 in the conversation.
I don't really know another video game that does like family as well as Dragon Quest V either. Like I played it pretty recently, and I only played the DS one too, but like I still made my list. And it's like again, it's in conversation with 8 and 11 for my favorite. Like they all do something very different, very well, but they're all still Dragon Quest. Like all the gameplay systems are so beautifully simple, as you put it, Zach. Like that, it really just acts as like this vehicle for this like really emotional, beautiful story about family and about like so like family is like the one thing I love about number one thing I love about that game, but the number two thing I love is that it deals with heroism in a different way as well. Like there's the hero is not exactly who you expect it to be,
Mhm.
and it really plays with that like idea, and it kind of like evolves from 4, I guess, in a way, in that like you play through all these different characters in 4, whereas in 5 like the hero is like this ideal, and it looks at like heroism as like, you know, your father is the hero, and then like you have to carry that mantle, but then it's not you necessarily and something else, blah blah blah. And I think it just does it really well, especially for like a 91, right? Dragon Quest, no, 92. So yeah, I think that Dragon Quest 5 just is remarkable. And I think that it took a very long time. I mean, I haven't played any Dragon Quest between 5 and 8, actually, so I don't really know if I can comment on this, but like it does feel like the story hasn't really reached that same height during that period. Nor I mean, I love Dragon Quest 8's story, but like I think that in terms of like the emotional impact, like 11 is the only thing that even gets close to it. And I think that's why those two are always in like dialogue for me too. Like which one's the best one? Well, one's about family and the other one's about like what you want, like what you want to get out of life, essentially. So yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And I just love Yuji Ori for what he tried out with both Dragon Quest 4 and Dragon Quest 5. It's almost like he was looking towards like literature as an inspiration for
Mhm.
structuring an RPG in a unique way that tells a story in a way that feels completely appropriate for its genre, and not awkward in any way. And in terms of like Dragon Quest 4 being like this Canterbury Tales type like anthology of like different people's journeys, and then Dragon Quest 5 being more of like a Bildungsroman story of following one person through like different stages of their life. And both games, for being in the early 90s of all things, um pulling those off as well as they did are it's phenomenal, honestly. And Dragon Quest 5, I actually went back to play like the original versions of like the first 6 Dragon Quest games in the last year for a an academic project I'm working on. And this was my first time playing all of Dragon Quest 5 on the Super Nintendo version, so my ranking is kind of affected by that. I rank the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom version specifically. If I could just take like my favorite parts of all 3 versions, the
Mm.
original, the PS2 version, the DS version, and lump them all into one game, like that would be a contender for like a number 1 spot. Like I
Yeah, losing Deborah is definitely a reason to take it down a notch or two.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. I knew you I was gonna make a joke about this and you beat me to it.
But yeah, Dragon Quest 5 also in terms of the way it played, just I know it's not like the most like aesthetically astounding game on the Super Famicom, but like combat moves so quickly in it.
Mhm.
Like they were able to use that like extra processing power to just make it so playable and so breezy, and the storytelling just feels so effortless. And it's like one of the first RPGs, if not the first, to have like romancing, which like these days, like if your RPG doesn't have romancing, people get up in arms about it because they want to get some virtual smooches in their playthroughs. But yeah, Dragon Quest V, just phenomenal execution and an incredibly ahead of its time concept for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm the only one that didn't include it on their list, and that is only because I've not played it. But hearing all three of you talk about it, it's really making me want to play this game, and I think I might have the DS version here. That's also how I played Dragon Quest IV,
Mhm.
was on the DS, but that's why that made my list and 5 didn't. I wanted to put the Dragon Quest on there, but I've just not played 5. But it sounds like it's superior, so I will definitely be giving that a look here soon.
I mean, there are definitely people who prefer 4, I think, but if you enjoyed 4, I think you're going to have a good time with 5,
Y-
especially if you, because the monster collecting thing, we haven't talked about it much, but that is a significant portion of
mm,
Dragon Quest 5. You like Pokemon, it would be fun, but it's not overwhelming.
Yeah,
It's
that
a real
sounds
good
like it would
video
be right
game.
up my alley.
mhm.
Yeah, you would dig it
Yeah.
for sure.
Dragon Quest IV is like amazing too, I think.
Hmm.
I did almost consider it. But yeah, like it's weird how like every Dragon Quest game is very good and there's just like margins between all of them, right? Like I mean 6 is like maybe people's least favorite and 7 I think the 3DS version might count against the PlayStation 1 version in many different ways. Um but yeah, what a series.
Yeah, it's
What a
amazing
series
how
indeed.
similar they are while distinguishing themselves in
Uh-huh.
with every entry. It's like it actually blows my mind. Yuji Horii is a genius of this medium.
I need that genius to bring out another Dragon Quest game soon.
You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
12. Bring us
12.
Need
12.
12. So, speaking of major creators,
Mm.
uh, this is the best transition I can come up with. A person who only created 3 video games. So we have a two-way tie for fourth, and we're just going to go again. And the first one is Earthbound. Earthbound is one of those games that I think that when I played it at the time, so I played Earthbound again when it came out, that I did not even come close to appreciating how great it was. Because to me, I was like, oh, this is just kids in life, and yeah, adults do weird things sometimes. You're right. I don't understand what they're doing. I was like 9 when I played this game, which I think is like a perfect time to first experience Earthbound as an American, no less. And it's also one of the first games, maybe the first game in the JRPG genre, as far as I'm aware, that has an excellent localization. Just
Mhm.
fantastic.
Mhm.
So I was not the person who put Earthbound highest on my list. I believe that was it? It was Alex.
Yeah.
Alex, talk to us about Earthbound.
Ugh, where do we even start? Earthbound's such a curiosity because in terms of its gameplay fundamentals, it's like as basic 90s ass RPG as you can get. It's basically just Dragon Quest. But it takes that like just foundation and infuses it with such a distinct flavor that it feels like a completely different kind of experience. And obviously, Earthbound is a sort of satire of America through a Japanese lens. Um, the way it baked that all into just little flavorful details in its mechanics, like saving is you calling your dad, your kind of deadbeat dad who's like never around and you never see him, but always has like things to talk about in terms of his work and everything, and talking how stressed he is and all that. Like it's such a creative little touch, or like dying and then like being sent back to the hospital, and having to regroup from there. Like all these little details that Earthbound achieved in order to make its world feel distinct and coherent and thematically cohesive is just the largest influence on indie RPGs ever. I think that's fair to say. Games like Undertale would just not exist without Earthbound's kind of whimsy and it's what it manages to do with a relatively fixed formula, the way it uses text in battles, along with that first person point of view, to sometimes have like these very thorough moments of like character development or like plot development or feeling expressed through like a battle, and also just being so silly and funny and creative outside of that, just talking to npcs who are all like insane twists on like american tropes, is just like I could go back to this game, just talk to npcs and have a great time, and beyond that it's a pretty well balanced and interesting adventure. Yeah, earthbound rules.
I think of all the games that we've talked about so far, Earthbound might be the one that has aged the best, and that I could still pick up today and enjoy it just as much. I've played it with my kids; they still enjoy it. They dig that kind of that humor still carries over, and it still resonates with kids today as much as it did with '90s kids. So, um, yeah, I love Earthbound. It's probably one of those games that I'll always kind of go back to. And you're right; you can see its influence so much just in the indie game landscape that it's you might think that having that just kind of first person view, where you're just seeing the enemy and you're not seeing yourself, could be a negative, but just the way it works, it is actually it's a positive.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think you did a really good job explaining why Earthbound's great, and I don't have much to add to it other than I just absolutely love this game.
Yeah, I played this pretty late. It was another one of those ones that never made it to the Europe. The Europe? Europe.
It's the Europe. You
The
you got it right the
Europe.
first time.
It's fine. I mean,
That's what we call it over here in North
Yeah.
I
America,
was
you
gonna
know?
say the UK is not part of Europe anyway anymore, and that's a whole different story that I don't want to go into anyway. So Earthbound, yeah, we the first time I played it was on the Wii U, and I loved it. Like, but then I'm playing it as an adult, right? Who's like aware of like Americanisms and like growing up as a teenager in the 2000s. It's like you become aware of all this like kind of Americanization of things, and you see something satirizing it in a way that like is both like funny and also like empathetic to the people there. It's like, oh, this is like kind of revolutionary for the time. I think my favorite thing about Earthbound is something that like Zach said earlier. Like when you play it as a kid, you're just like, oh, it's kids going on an adventure. And I think it's like it's very simple for me to sit here and say it is ultimately about like kids have something important to say and have meaning too. But that's what it is. Like it's like adults the adults and kids dichotomy in that game is like so interesting. Um and there are some like really troubling things in that game too, with like Porky's parents and stuff. But like there are so many moments where like the kids are really intelligent and they really just like go with the flow. Like anyone else would find like the Mr. Saturn very strange, but the kids just kind of accept it. It's like part of the world, part of this like whole experience. And I mean, I guess it benefits that Ness is silent and the other characters don't have a ton of dialogue. But like Earthbound, just like you can tell that Itoi, Shigesato Itoi, was like a journalist before he wrote stories for video games, because he really understands like the importance of language and of treating the subjects with like humanity. And he does it throughout. He does it through all three games, I think. But yeah, like as simple as like Earthbound is on the surface, like the Peanuts style art, as Jimmy said, like that part of it will appeal to kids, and 90s humor at this point is like pretty timeless, right? And it's just like it's aged so well, and I think that is a really good point. Is like I think of all the RPGs I've ever played, I think about like Earthbound is like better now than it was in 1994 when it came out, which you can it's aged in some ways, sure, but like the story it tells and the way it tells it and the humor it uses is just like effortless, and it's it's one of my favorite Super Nintendo games, which it's one of the last Super Nintendo RPGs I played too. So the fact that it like sits so high, and then Mother 3 comes out like what 12 years later and does something very different with like similar ideas but also very different ideas. Like, it's mind blowing. Like that trilogy of games is like kind of incredible to me. Just how well they all work together. Even Earthbound Beginnings, which has its problems, but yeah, it's just phenomenal. I really miss Satoi's work. I really want him to do some more.
Yeah. It's funny because there are two things I hold against Earthbound. I think I ranked it eighth, which is lower than everyone else. One is that I used to have that cardboard box collector's edition that is now worth like
I
$4,000,
know.
and I don't have it anymore.
Oh,
So I'm
no.
mad about that. But in all sincerity, I think that it's hard for me sometimes to separate Earthbound from Mother 3,
Yeah.
which to me is the better game. But something you talked about earlier, Alana, I think is really important, and that is that outside of a couple of instances, the game, even for the ridiculousness of the adults, has enormous empathy for them.
Uh-huh.
It understands why they're doing the stupid they're doing, and it's just fascinating as like a piece of media in the way that it presents it. The other thing that I think is interesting too is, like, as you pointed out, like a lot of the characters don't have much dialogue. Ness is silent and everyone else doesn't talk much. But I still feel like I know Jeff. I know Paula really, really well, because Itoy does this really interesting thing with characterization in that game where like other people talk about you as the
Yeah.
characters so often that you understand them, and like no one else is doing that. And when we talk about good characterization, like what other people say about you is much more important than what you say about yourself, right? And so I think that Earthbound is really is the complete package, and it is very deserving of number 4 on our list.
Yeah, I also think it does, like, part of the way that it manages to make its main cast feel more like people, even without a lot of dialogue, is just through, like, the introduction sequences to them, like Jeff's whole introduction sequence, Pooh's whole introduction sequence on the floating continent, and that whole meditation sequence, which is, like, my favorite part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
It manages to characterize them as protagonists in themselves, through just these little bits that just add so much background to them, and just like tells a story about them in a way that isn't just like written, but in a way that is like experienced as a player, and then you get them in your party, and so you feel like you know them better, and then obviously Paula's moment like at the end of the game is huge.
Mm-hmm.
So I just love what the game is able to do for its cast without even writing them, because it just has these other ways of storytelling also.
Last word on Earthbound is I think that it's interesting that it is so influential and so many people miss the point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nadia Oxford, who is a freelance writer and does Axe the Blood God, great RPG podcast that you should listen to. She wrote a piece years ago about like how indie games miss the point,
Yes.
and it's all quirk. It's all quirk, it's all quirk, it's all quirk, but it's no humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And there are very few games that really get the humanity. I think, like, obviously Undertale, which is influenced by Earthbound, but I don't think about it that way. Really, I don't. It gets it. A deep cut here, but there's an indie game called Jimmy and the Pulsating Mass, which I reviewed for RPG Fan back in 2018. That game got the spirit of Earthbound, but it's so often like it's just like it's quirk, it's quirk, it's quirk, it's quirk, it's quirk, and it doesn't see like the clashing tones, and they don't understand how to get there.
Yeah, the way that like modern video game media, speaking from like experience, has to like navigate that line between like this Earthbound inspired RPG. Like, how many times have you read a headline like that, and how many times do you like roll your eyes at that? Like, that is part of that, and also it's like every time I see or write something like that, I'm like, are you though? Like, really? Do you really get it? So yeah, I remember reading Nadia's piece and have just like constantly think about that idea of like empathy and understanding all the time, and like Earthbound is one of the few that actually gets that. So yeah.
Speaking of good localizations, at least a later version of it.
Yes.
I don't want to speak to the PS1 version, but we are going to move on now to our number 4 on our list, and there is a series that you will see come up with some regularity, and to no one's surprise, Final Fantasy is here again. But at number 4 on our list is Final Fantasy Tactics. I'll go ahead and start with Final Fantasy Tactics. When I first got Final Fantasy Tactics, like it was right after Final Fantasy VII. And I was like, oh, I'm just like, it's another Final Fantasy game. That's cool. And then I start playing this game and I start getting obliterated. I was like, what is this? Like, what are these squares? I don't understand. they're very confusing. And then as I started to get it, I was like, oh, okay. I moved this person that way, and I've got these little. I can make this guy a ninja, and I can make him dual wield. It'll jump over that wall, and he'll just one shot that thing. And just like the systems in Final Fantasy Tactics are so fun to break, so fun to mess around with, but also at times extremely challenging. Maybe too challenging if you go into like the Y-Graph fight unprepared and you get soft locked. Um, and the systems are so fun, and for me it was an amazing introduction to tactical RPGs. Like the beginning of that game is really freaking hard. Even when I've played this game like 8 times, probably even now, like I get bodied in those opening 8 hours with some regularity in Final Fantasy Tactics. But as you go, the way you can sort of like see systems and make them work together. Obviously Final Fantasy V did that earlier, but I hadn't played that yet, so like I was like obsessed with that idea of sort of min-maxing, and that's the thing that I am very guilty of now. Even at the time, the thing that struck me the most about Final Fantasy Tactics was its storytelling, and just, how much the personal sort of impacted the global, and how strong these characters were, and how much I understood Delita, and how much I understood Ramza and his brothers. And it's just, it's such a remarkable piece of storytelling from a political perspective, and it did it before these kinds of political storytelling styles were common, especially in anything outside of historical fiction, to be honest with you. I mean, Game of Thrones had come out a few years earlier, but I'm guessing that the writers of Tactics had not read Game of Thrones, because they, did Tactics Ogre, which has a lot in common with it. But it's just an amazing story. The War of the Lions version, obviously, which doesn't really count here, but I'm counting it a little bit anyway. Like that localization there with sort of that early modern English styling is really interesting. And it just, I think that it elevated storytelling in RPGs and JRPGs in a way that had not been done previously, and is very rarely matched even now.
Yeah, I don't even really know. Like, I think about like political stories and tactical RPGs, and I'm like, has this been surpassed yet in either category? Which feels like a completely bombastic thing to say. But like, as someone who doesn't like totally love Fire Emblem and who doesn't like totally love strategy RPGs in general, like even one of my more like recent favorite strategy RPGs, Unicorn Overlord, the story is like nothing, and yet like Final Fantasy Tactics manages to balance like this like it, incredibly like political but also like personal to a degree as well, like story with like really engaging gameplay. And like it's not really until you start getting into the weeds of the job system that you really start to understand it, but when you do get it, it's like, oh, now I really get it. And it's like you're like running through maps on like you're on fire or something. Like it's just amazing. And I think it's like totally fair to think of like the War of the Lions version, even if like the original localization is like still pretty good. But like the gameplay is exactly the same. Like it's timeless, and you see that. Like it's hard again, like we were saying with Earthbound. Like how many like indie strategy RPGs are based off of Final Fantasy Tactics? Like a lot, I think, and some from Fire Emblem too, obviously. But to me, like Tactics is like still the gold standard of the genre, and this was like one of the first ones we ever got here in the West, and it made nearly all of our lists and nearly all of them pretty high too. So yeah, it's remarkable. Like Delita is like an amazing character. Like Rams is great too, but Delita is like that game to me. I think of Delita, I think of Agrius, and I think of Thunder God Sid too. Those are the three characters I think of. Even if Ramza is like a really good protagonist too, it's like a 4 for 4 for like amazing
I
characters.
think of Thunder God Sid just deleting the entire game in the last quarter.
Oh
And
yeah,
and no matter how many times I play that game, I'm like, no, I'm not going to use him this time. I'm
you
not
just
going to use him
have
this
to.
time.
It's so
Then I get
good.
him, I'm like, no, it's too fun. It's too
It's
fun to just
it's
destroy everything
so
after I
fun.
struggled, especially after the struggle that is the end of Act 3. I'm
Uh
like,
huh.
no, Sid, you're just destroying everyone.
Yeah,
But the
you
cathedral,
earn a sit
yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's interesting to think of this game like as a Final Fantasy specifically, because I was obsessed with Final Fantasy throughout my entire childhood and teenage years, but Tactics is one that I couldn't get into for the longest time until I was like 16 or something like that. Purely for one reason, because it was too hard, as you were describing, Zach. My little kid brain could not handle this game. And especially the fact that its opening hours are the hardest part of the game, like, doesn't really help. But also, like, it doesn't have that spec spectacle aspect that a lot of Final Fantasy, especially since 6, sort of took advantage of and relied on, and made for, like, really uh technically interesting and innovative and enjoyable kind of storytelling. Uh but then, like, I started to think of tactics more as like a play. If, like, Final Fantasy 7 is like a movie, like, Tactics is like a Shakespearean drama where, like, the good bits of the storytelling are all about, like, take place on these kind of, like, little planes that they make for specific battles. But then it's just like about dialogue. It's about, like, the spacing of, like, the stage, if you will. And in terms of just, like, the raw writing you get from that, and, like, the character dynamics, especially Brahms and Delita are two of the most interesting characters in a single video game for their dynamic alone. um like, I just, like, Final Fantasy Tactics as a storytelling really hit, and then I was able to get really into its systems. The fact that it just basically lifts FF5's flexible job system, puts it into a strategy game, makes for an extremely good time and an extremely replayable game. And now I absolutely love this game. It's one of my favorite Final Fantasies, no doubt.
Yeah, so I have very similar experiences in that first playing it, it destroyed me. Except my story kind of stops there. Uh, I never really grasped it. And I also had a friend that was like obsessed with it, and I don't know if anybody else has ever come across this, but sometimes when there's someone in your life that is so passionate about a certain thing, it kind of turns you off a little bit to it.
Oh no, I
It's
understand.
almost like they overhype it. Um, but I will say, just because of everything I've heard about the story, that this is the only game that I've ever watched a full let's play of, from beginning to end, just so I could experience the story without having to frustrate myself and try to power through the actual combat parts. So, um, yeah, so that says something that just I wanted to experience that story that I've heard so much about. And you're right. I mean, it's a great story. Um, I'm gonna say it's more of a me problem than a game problem, that the difficulty. But yeah, um, that's all I've got to say about it.
Would make a great play, I think. Like a really good stage play.
You should write it.
I started to write it when I was like 17, but
I was gonna say, I think
it's
I've
too
done
hard.
it. I think I've done it with something in my life, but like I am not a playwright. I am not, unfortunately.
No, it's real good, and it's real playable, real playable. I replayable. I can say words. I'm capable.
I hope the if that remaster remake ever happens, then I hope that it's either more accessible for people and like being able to be like customizable with like difficulty and stuff like that, or I just like hope that it like retains that like the War of the Lions translation specifically. I think I'd be a little heartbroken if they like changed it more, and I'd be like, oh,
Yeah, I
oh,
can't imagine it. It's so
yeah,
popular at this point.
yeah.
For every 1,000 people who love that translation on the internet, you'll find one who doesn't. But the 1,000, I think, should win. So, well, speaking of good translations, not, but also political storytelling. Our next game, number 3, which you can tell I did not rig this count, because if I had rigged this count, this game would be in its rightful place at number 1. With 2 number 1 votes, finishing number 3 on our list is Suikoden 2. Boo, boo. Should have been number 1. Boo. So I very recently, Aleks too, spent a lot of time talking about Suikoden 2. So I don't want to start by talking about it because I have talked about Suikoden 2 so much. But Alana, I know you were also a fan of Suikoden 2 because you also voted it number 1.
I did.
So why did Suikoden 2 hit the number 1 spot for you?
Because of everything it does, basically. I've talked about Speaking to a lot as well, but much longer ago than you. That's not how you say that sentence. Never mind. But yeah, Suikoden 2 just it's one of those games when we talk about like things that people love a lot, and I know how much of a reputation Suikoden 2 had among RPG fan readers. And I put off playing it for so long, and I did that with like Final Fantasy VI and a couple of other games as well, that like sometimes that reputation like overwhelms me a little bit. But then I played it as part of Retro Encounter, and I played 1 and 2 back to back, and I just, for what it was doing, again, like I talk about like Final Fantasy VII as being political and Xenogears as being sort of theological, political in some ways. I think that ties in with it. And then Tactics as being political. But Suikoden like really takes like that personal angle and puts it like really at the heart of that game. Like that game is about like the war and is about like the human suffering, which you guys talked about really well on the podcast. I thought like it really understands like the human sacrifice of war and not just like war as like a political tool. It does like both things very well. But like ultimately that game to me is about like, it's about Ryo, it's about Joey, and it's about Nanami. It's about those three and having their lives like torn apart and trying to like fix it, and both sides having like different problems. Like it works in shades of grey, to use a quote that you used back in those podcasts. And I think that like it just does such a remarkable job of like really dealing with that human side in a way that I think like a lot of other games don't from that period of time. And I like sobbed multiple times in that game. The first time I played it, I like cried so many times. I didn't know things. I didn't know what happened 2/3 of the way through the game. I didn't know about things that happened towards the end of the game. I'd gone like 25 years without being spoiled, or 20 years without being spoiled. And every moment hit that it was meant to hit in the same way. And I think like the pacing is pretty good. There's like a middle section that maybe is a little slow, but like everything just, I think for me, like part of it is like the communal experience of playing it as well, like comes into it. It just like, it just nails it. It's everything. It does everything it wants to do, and it does it pretty much as well as it can do, given budgetary limitations and stuff like that. Yeah, Suikoden 2 is just like a revelation, and I think like while I know that the next two games are way more widely beloved by everyone, I think Suikoden 2 for me is like the pinnacle of like personal stories amid like national conflict, and just like how that changes people and how that can change or fray the bonds of friendship and family and love, and how you can forge that too in that. Like it just deals with so many different layers so well, that I, even like replaying it with the remaster recently, I was just like, yeah, this game's amazing. I could never say anything bad. I can say bad things about it, but I'm never going to, because it's just a fantastic experience. And like I've only played this game twice, and I'm still not unhappy with it at all.
And see, now that's why we're married. You know, I don't have much to say, but I want to point out some crap that Aleks said to me when he was submitting his vote.
What?
So I want to point it out. So Aleks, he was thinking about putting Suikoden 2 on his list, which would have been the right choice. He made the wrong choice and he didn't put it on his list. And he said two things that are wrong. One is, he said Delita greater than Joey, which Delita is excellent, but he doesn't have the humanity of Joey. Joey like is someone who is so consistently like we're with him, we feel him, we understand him. Whereas Delita's like so far off here in the distance that while we get what he's doing, he's so much more mysterious. And so Joey is more emotional, and you can save your rebuttal for a moment here. And second of all, you said that Dracula in Symphony of the Night, because you put Symphony of the Night on the list, which did not make our list, but is very deserving. It's a great game. Is better than Necklord. All I have to say is Necklord's battle theme is much better than the battle themes. Any music in Symphony of the Night, which is saying something, because the music in that is good.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
Boom.
This is what. No. Oh, okay. Oh my goodness me. We've got to have a talk after this podcast's over. Oh boy.
That is an insane claim.
Oh, like that song is really good. And I have
It
massive
is.
problems with Michiru Yamane as a person. But the Symphony of the Night soundtrack is probably the best PS1 soundtrack. One of
outside of the Necklord track.
Outside
Boom.
of Chrono Cross. Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Fine. Okay.
Alana, you're speaking my language.
See, Aleks and I get it. That's Necklord's great. I disagree with Aleks on Necklord, but like I do get the pacing problem there. And you guys talked about it very well. I will be quiet now so that Aleks can defend himself.
Yeah, and I will defend a little bit, but I also don't want to harp on this game too much because I ultimately did love it a lot for the most part. But I will address the Jowie claim. And yeah, Jowie has more humanity, you could say, than Delta in terms of characterization, but then his character arc doesn't make as much sense because of that humanity they try to portray him as, in my opinion. Um, we go over that in the Suikoden 2 podcast, so I will just direct listeners to there if they want to hear my critiques about Jowie's late game characterization. But he's still a fascinating character. I still teared up at the ending when you unite with him again. I just thought they missed the mark a little bit in terms of like how they were trying to represent him as a completely logical and sympathetic figure despite what he does. And Delta's just cooler, I just I'm just gonna call it what it is.
I love Joey, but Delator is cooler. That is like a universal truth.
False.
I mean, I like Joey more as a character, but like Deleter is so interesting.
I'm not going to say anything more about Suikoden 2, and I know the only reason that Jimmy didn't vote for Suikoden 2 is because Jimmy hasn't played Suikoden 2. Boo.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll get there, I promise.
I'm just kidding. It's almost like you have children or like other things to do in your
Well,
life.
and at least
okay.
now it's accessible easily.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's like 25 hours as well. It's not super long with the new remaster. So
yeah, and I obviously that would be number one for me, but like the next two, I hate to tell y'all, but like everybody who's listening to this podcast is expecting the next two to be the final two. And the question is, which one's first? And coming in at number 2 on our list is, in my opinion, arguably the most perfect RPG ever made, although it only finished 4th on my list, is Chrono Trigger. So we're going to start with you, Jimmy, because Alana just talked about Suikoden 2. You put it on number 3 on your list. And this is one of only, I think, 3 games to appear on everyone's lists: Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, and then number 1, which we'll get to. So why'd you put it at number 3, Jimmy?
Again, it's one of those games that really kind of influenced the entire genre in ways that not many games have throughout the history of video games. It's just, the whole super team that came together to kind of create it. And it's just, I've never really met anyone that's played this game and has anything overly negative to say about it. It's just universally beloved. I actually played it for the first time. The DS version is the first time I played it because again, I didn't. I was kind of late to the SNES JRPG party, but even then, years later, as an adult playing it on a 3DS, it still blew me away. And I thought by then that it wouldn't resonate with me that way because I wasn't experiencing it at the same time as a lot of the people that loved it. And it's still, I understood completely the hype after I completed it, and then immediately did a new game. And I'm not one of those people that I do not play games multiple times very often, at all, if at all. And Chrono Trigger, any game that gets multiple playthroughs out of me, that definitely means something. And so yeah, it's just a great game. I have nothing bad to say about it. Some of my favorite video game characters, Frog is actually my favorite in Chrono Trigger. Just every character is great. The story is fantastic. The whole time travel thing, which has always been big for me, going all the way back to the Back to the Future movies. Just yeah, I can't say enough about Chrono Trigger and what hasn't been said about Chrono Trigger already.
it's pretty wild that like it's just celebrated its 30th anniversary, and I remember thinking like, what can I say about this game that no one's ever said before? Nothing, because like you said, Jimmy, like everyone who's played it loves it and has I think that like Chrono Trigger is like so again, like so many other games that I think we've talked about, like Chrono Trigger knows what it's doing, and like it knows what it's doing so confidently as well that like it doesn't really put a foot wrong. And I think in some ways that can like count against it. Like it is very clean and perfect, and like it's scripted battles, and the boss fights are all like very epic, and it's not like a super difficult game, which I think is actually like a plus for it. Like
Mhm.
it is so easy to say like, look, you don't like Super Nintendo RPGs, or you don't like turn-based RPGs, or you don't like random encounters. This is the game for you. Like there is a reason that like so many people put Chrono Trigger in high regard, and I still do as well. Like I played it very late again because Europe never got this until the DS, and even then I wait until the Wii port, I think, on the virtual console. And I was just like, this is like one of the times again, like with Suikoden 2 and other games, I was just like, I get it. This is why people love this game. And it just completely nailed every single aspect it was going for. And I think again, like so many of the games that we've talked about, I think it does a really good job of like portraying humanity and hope in a way that's like so simple and so like understandable, but also like in like such a good way that you can like engage with it. Like it's just like it just feels like there's a reason that this is like the RPG. Every let's go back to Earthbound again, actually, because like we talked about like how many how many indie games try to be like Earthbound likes. How many times do you see this game was inspired by Chrono Trigger? And again, I think so many people miss the point of Chrono Trigger when they try and make those like inspiration games inspired by like Sea of Stars is one of those in my heart. And I hate to say that, but it is. It like completely misses it.
Mhm.
Because Chrono Trigger is so like concise and so understanding of like what it's trying to do. And you have to acknowledge as well, like the money, the budget, and also the people behind it. They're like some of the biggest names in the industry, and they were big then as well. Like Sakaguchi and Yuji Horii and Akira Toriyama and like Yasunori Mitsuda and Nobuo Uematsu and the person who went on to direct Live Alive and Tokita, right? And it's just like so much of Chrono Trigger is like there's a reason it's called the Dream Team. Like
Mhm.
this is it. Like this is an RPG. Like you look at JRPG in the dictionary, and I think Chrono Trigger would be next to it, which is like such a cliche thing to say, but I do think that this is like the game I think of when someone says that. So yeah, it was number two. I put it highest, I think, out of everybody. I put it at number two. And like it does just feel like in the same way that Final Fantasy VII being like a good answer for like the best RPG. I think Chrono Trigger is that as well, but also it's just almost faultless, and but also in a way that I think is really fun and really like engaging thematically too.
Yeah, I feel like the only interesting thing I can say about Chrono Trigger is just explain its placement on my personal list. Which I mean, 10 years ago it would have been number two, right behind the number one overall pick. But it did come at nine for me in today's age, and the best way I can put that is like, and I don't mean this to like be any kind of like objective sort of statement. Like this is totally subjective. This is totally my taste. Like for me, Chrono Trigger is there because it is only a perfect RPG. It is that's all it is. It's just a
Mhm.
perfect RPG. And obviously that's more of a compliment than anything. I really do think this game is pretty much more like that word perfect is obviously very elusive, but if I were to assign it to any game, it would be this or maybe Dragon Quest 11. And it is an absolute blast to play. It has all these super memorable sequences, amazing graphics, amazing music. But it just doesn't take the kinds of swings games like Earthbound, games
Mhm.
like Linda Cubed, which I put one position above it. Games like Persona 2 Innocent Sin. Like those are just Xenogears. Those are games that like I love about 90s RPGs that just like took that foundation of the JRPG structure and just did something weird with it and experimented and missed a lot, but also like created some like extremely memorable experiences. And Chrono Trigger just executes everything it does perfectly without feeling like there's much to chew on after the fact. It's just like I'm having an amazing time while I'm playing it, and then that's it, and that's amazing. And I don't want to pretend like that's not like an achievement and that I don't love this game. But in
Yeah.
terms of like my personal tastes, it's a little less
Yeah.
appealing to me at this point.
No, that's totally fair, I think. There is certainly less to chew on than other games, and although I think there is some stuff, it's like not as, you can't get into like a 3-hour dialogue about Chrono Trigger in the same way you can about like pretty much any other game
Even
on this
Chrono
list.
Cross.
Chrono Cross for sure. Like if you want a
Yeah.
game that gives you something to chew on, Chrono Cross is
Yeah.
that, right? Like I don't love the way Chrono Cross plays, but I absolutely laud and respect what it does with like themes and like how it like twists the sequel idea or like I don't really know how to classify it. It's a sequel. We know that. Chrono Cross is like such a big swing and such a miss in so many ways in the same way that like Xenogears is, and but like it does so many interesting things with like the dialogue with Chrono Trigger in specifics. I'm never begrudging of people who are like, oh yeah, Chrono Trigger, because Chrono Trigger is just clean and perfect. I get it, so it's like never a problem.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, Alex, you sort of stole exactly what I was going to say. I mean, I put it in fourth on my list, which even for me, I'm like, that seems kind of low. But like, no, I like these three games above it more, and they're all three games we've talked about at this point. And it's one of those games that I remember the first time I played it, I was like, I loved it, but it didn't blow my mind. And Chrono Trigger at no point in my whole life has blown my mind.
Mhm.
And I think that it's I recently in a chat about another more recent video game, I said that it was like someone created this game in a lab to appeal to my tastes. And Chrono Trigger to me feels like it was a game that was created in a lab, and it's almost true. Like take the greatest minds
Uh-huh.
in the industry and let's make the best RPG, but not the most interesting RPG. And I think it's maybe a little bit facile to say that it doesn't do anything new because like the there are enemies on the map and like the pacing itself in and of itself is sort of, and like the way, like the rhythm of it
Mhm.
is almost unique and is almost new.
Mhm.
But it beyond that, like as Alana said, like I can have a 15-minute conversation about the themes, quote unquote, of Chrono Trigger, but what else am I going to say? Game good, the end. Um, so yeah, it's why it only finished fourth on my list, but fourth is still pretty high in the 90s. It's still a damn good
Right.
RPG.
Shocker, Chrono Trigger's good.
Yeah, but everybody knows what's coming next.
Mhm.
There's no question, right? Uh, and the only reason that you didn't know it at the start was because Chrono Trigger exists, and Final Fantasy VI is retro encounters 90s RPG, which I think is an excellent choice. It appeared on all of our lists, I believe, in our top 6 votes. Yeah, I was actually the one who had it the lowest at number 6, but Alex was the only one who had it at number 1. So talk to me about why Final Fantasy VI is somehow better than Dragon Quest V or Suikoden 2.
Well, yeah, I
I'm
feel
just
like
kidding.
I feel like I've done this on the podcast so many times.
I know.
Um, yeah, what else can I say about this game at this point? Like, okay, I'll continue on from what I was saying about Chrono Trigger. Like, what mattered most for me as a kid was like just for a game to be cool and fun. And so I loved like Zelda, I loved like the Final Fantasies. Chrono Trigger like was absolutely amazing in that aspect. Now as an adult, I'm more attracted to games that are like interesting and distinct in some ways, and that take some swings, in terms of their design and their storytelling and how they try to link those two together, especially. And I struggled a lot with putting this list together, but ultimately, the approach I took was to try to throw nostalgia out the window and make a game that appeals to my taste currently the most. And that's sort of what I did in terms of my ranking. Um, Games that that I think now are the most interesting and that give me that the most to chew on, as I was sort of describing. But if a game can be both cool and fun and interesting in that sense, that's a welcome bonus, and that's exactly what Final Fantasy VI is for me. I just like I love playing this game. I love thinking about what it tries to do with its sort of two-act structure. I love the way it pushed characterization specifically through that two-act structure. In terms of like building up characters in a more traditional sort of fantasy adventure in that first act, and then spoiler alert, things go very bad in the world, and then everybody has to sort of work through the traumatic experience they all just had, both personally and sort of on a global scale. And going back to play Final Fantasy VI for retro, I think it was about a year ago now. The game just hit all the same notes that it did all those times ago. I don't think I'd played the game for almost a decade at that point, and the fact that it only increased my opinion of the game, if anything, I think says a lot, at least for me personally. um, is just very easy to play. It has a lot of cool ideas it's trying to do in terms of making its characters feel distinct, both in how they're presented in the world and the story, and also through their unique character actions. And then there's a lot of just like building with the materia system beyond that. And it plays amazing. It's conceptually really well executed, and it's still my favorite RPG of all time.
Yeah, I mean, like I put Final Fantasy VI at 5, but I would say positions 2 through 5 on my list are basically the same. I would say this is like you talk about like so and like I put tactics above it, but like realistically, I'm like like even if I put this list pretty confidently together, I was just like if I think about it too much outside of like I knew what number 1 was going to be, I'm gonna like mess around with it for like 4 hours. So I like put them down, wrote them down, and then was like, okay, I think this is the order that feels right to me. Like,
I spent like a month and a half on it.
Yeah.
no, I think like because I there's like so many other games that were like close to my list that other people have mentioned here, and like I don't have a lot of experience with like Western RPGs, and like Final Fantasy VI is like definitely another top 5 Final Fantasy for me. Like it's just like and Aleks put it like really beautifully and has done multiple times. I think my favorite thing about Final Fantasy VI is its cast and just the way that again it's another extremely political RPG. I did not play this until it came to Europe. Well, not even on the PlayStation 1, but that is the version I did play. The worst version. Don't play that one. But yeah, it just deals with like the personal stakes of revolution incredibly well. Like the different factors, the different factions, the way that people fight for other people, and the way that people band together. And forgiveness too. And I think to spin it like slightly more personally, I guess, I think Final Fantasy has never been better with its female characters than in 6.
Mm.
Except maybe Yuna in 10. And maybe Aerith in the remakes, I guess. But I think of Celeste and I think of Terra. And I think of two, like, despite like some of the flaws in like the romance story with Celeste, and also I think that like those two characters are Final Fantasy VI to me. Like it's all about the politics of the Empire and Kefka and the evil things he does, which, you know, like again, another like thing that I've noticed in a lot of people's lists is like these games have really good villains. Like the 90s feels like a very special time for like the villain character. Like you think of the villain of like Dragon Quest V, of Earthbound, of Ocarina of Time and Chrono Trigger and like these like forces of nature in some ways, and Suikoden 2 as well. Like Kefka is just like an incredibly well written villain that you just absolutely hate from the minute you see him. Like, and the game never really lets up on that opinion. And he's like really stupid as well. And it's like, oh, this guy's just like a farce. And then he just does like so many.
A guy who's a farce who does megalomaniacal,
Right.
like horrible
He
things.
poisons
That could never happen in
people.
real life.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Man,
This
I
is
didn't
when
realize FF6 was woke.
I'm sure there are people online. It's the same people who think that Hideo Kojima is not political, remember? Like the same people who say that Metal Gear Solid is apolitical, think that
Yeah,
Final
the,
Fantasy
the
VI
most
is
political
woke.
game ever. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
makes sense.
Oh, but yeah, like I think like Celeste and Terra are just like two of the best Final Fantasy characters ever, I think. And the way that it treats their like faults and their like struggles so well. Like the arc where like Terra becomes a mother, like she works in this orphanage and looks after these kids and then helps these two like teenagers like have a child, and it's like just this really beautiful moment. And then Celeste's whole thing at the beginning of not disc two, act two, I should say, is like it just sticks with me. Like I think about like those two characters and all the things they go through before anything else in Final Fantasy VI, and you know there are so many things in that game that are messy and like all over the place and ambitious, and like Aleks said again, this game takes big swings. There are like few Final Fantasies I think that are as ambitious. I think their gameplay is pretty safe overall and it's very easy, but like again, that's like it means nothing to me when I think that Final Fantasy VI is a video game from 1994 that is dealing with such big things, and I'm sure like everybody's mind was like completely blown when the end of the world of balance cracks, like the
Oh yeah,
statues
I
move. Yeah.
I played this game when it came out, and I had no idea.
Right.
It blew my freaking mind.
Right. I did not know you could kill Shadow when I first played it, and I played this in 2016, and I was like, oh wait, where's Shadow? Wait, he's dead. I was like, I went to the arena where you're like, can recruit him, and I'm like, where is he? He's not appearing. And I was like, oh, I had to wait.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII is still my personal favorite, but Final Fantasy VI is a close second. It's just again, what more can you say about it? Kefka really, and this is coming from a Sephiroth fanboy. Kefka is probably the best Final Fantasy villain. I can just think he's like the personification of chaotic evil, if from a D&D perspective. And I think about that line in The Dark Knight where Alfred is telling him, like, he's explaining the Joker, and he says some men just want to watch the world burn. And Kefka is literally that description. He's just that evil. He just wants to cause complete chaos and destruction. And also, I will say that it is the only game, to my knowledge, where you can suplex a train, and
Very true.
that is
10 out of 10.
yeah,
No
exactly. Yep.
Yeah, you can't even do that in 14, can you? In the raid,
You cannot.
god damn.
I would still rank Final Fantasy VI as one of my 3 favorite Final Fantasies, probably, if you include Tactics in the list. And I agree with everything you guys said. I think that the structure is fascinating. It sort of does the progression in the world of Ruin almost in the way that you would do in a Dragon Quest game, where it's like you can go anywhere, but you shouldn't go anywhere. Whereas, the World of Balance is extremely structured in the way that you would expect it after coming off of Final Fantasy IV. I do think that occasionally the character writing gets a little thin at times, and there are definitely some things about it that I'm like, this game's pretty good. And the last time I played it was probably the time where I was like, it lowered a little bit in my estimation, but not by some enormous margin. I still think that it's a fabulous game. I think it's structurally interesting. I think it is very Alex coded in the way that it's ambitious and that it's messy. And I mean that in a good way, because I respect Alex's opinion a lot. And so I think that the fact that it's number 1 on our list, when probably most people coming into this expect a Chrono Trigger, I really like. And I think it reflects, the way we embrace messiness sometimes. And I really enjoy Final Fantasy VI. And that, folks, is the end of our list. So let's go ahead and run it down to make sure that people who are listening can remember what our list was. So we have a 3-way tie for 8th: Planescape Torment, Zelda Ocarina of Time, and Xenogears. I still can't get over how different those 3 games are. At number 7, we appropriately have Final Fantasy VII. At number 6, we have Dragon Quest V. At number 4, tied for 4, we have Earthbound and Final Fantasy Tactics. At number 3, boo, we have Suikoden 2. At number 2, we have Chrono Trigger. And then at number 1, we have Final Fantasy VI. So before we sign off, does anybody think there are any major crimes on this list? Things way too high, way too low? I've already expressed my opinion multiple times on this issue. How do you guys feel?
I can't be unhappy with it, and I hate that that's like my response to it, because I think about like the 90s, and I think about like how, like, even though most of, like, I'd say all of these games are like very well known, right? Like, we've all heard of all 10 of these games, and I'm sure every single person listening has heard of all 10 of these games. But how different are lots of these games as well? Like, we have, like, most of them are turn-based RPGs, but like they all deal with so many different things and all look and feel very different to each other, that I think honestly it's like, I mean, I hate to be like the 90s are like my favorite era, but they kind of are, because I mean, the PlayStation 1 and the Super Nintendo are still my two favorite video game consoles. And I don't think that will ever change. Partially, I guess it is partially a nostalgia thing with the PlayStation 1, but like, I love how ambitious some of those like RPGs are. And I feel like you rarely get that ambition nowadays. I guess the only real surprise, and I'm going to talk generally from an RPG fan audience, is it's kind of amazing that Lunar didn't get on. But I think that might be down to the fact that some people haven't played it, and I don't love them as much as most people do on RPG fans. So there you go.
I for the record, I had 2 Lunar games on my list, one at number 5 and one at number 9. So I agree. I agree. But I know it's not to everyone's taste. That's okay.
Zach's carrying the green shield for the rest of us.
He is.
I don't have any major gripes with the list. I do wish that there was a Sega Genesis title on it, just so
Yeah.
Sega kind of got a little bit of due there, because there are some good RPGs. Shining Force 2 was actually on my list, so I tried, but yeah, I kind of wish there was at least one game to represent the Genesis on there. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't have any gripes with the list. I think it's good.
Phantasy Star 4 was very close to making my list. So yeah, a little sad, because that was my first video game console, but ultimately I think I know people think of these two consoles first, so yeah.
Yeah, I was even trying to be conscious of having some Sega representation on my list. So on number 10, not that I shoehorned it in just because it is a Sega game, but Panzer Dragoon Saga, I think, is still a brilliant and one of a kind of game. That's worth anybody checking out if you can get it running. Or buy it if you're a
Yes.
millionaire.
Oh my
I was gonna
god.
say.
So, like, true story, we used to have 2 copies of that game, and
You say we, it's not me.
no, not us.
Two?
Okay, yes. Yes, my
Who?
mother, my family used to have 2 copies of that game, and we sold them before they blew up in price.
Oh my god.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just afraid of emulating it, but it's a game that I absolutely feel like I need to play.
Yeah, I'd love to replay
But
it.
yeah, like no Sega representation. I think no Panzer Dragoon Saga, no Fantasy Star 4. I've played Fantasy Star 4. I like it a lot, but I think that every game on our list surpasses it. There are
Mhm.
lots of things I like about it, but I just think that I think it gets hyped a little bit more because it was one of the rare instances you had to play an RPG on the Sega. Is my opinion, but I like it a lot, so it's a good game. But personally, for me, I think this is a great list. It's not my list, obviously, but in all sincerity, I think that it reflects the tastes of the people who are often on this podcast, and I think that is really what it's for. And yeah, so thank the 3 of you so much for putting your lists together. Some of you kind of last minute. I really appreciate it. And I thought it was a great conversation. It went a little longer than I wanted to, but I knew that was going to happen. We're talking about the 90s, man. Some good stuff. So let's talk about what's coming up next. So we are going to shift away from what's been a very 90s heavy last couple months on Retro Encounter. And in the next 2 episodes, we are going to be talking about Fallout New Vegas, which actually came up briefly on this episode. One of the people who worked on Planescape Torment went on to have a major role in Fallout New Vegas. I am extremely excited to play Fallout New Vegas. It's a game that I've wanted to play for a long time. Aleks keeps telling me to play it, and I trust Aleks, so I'm excited to play it. After that, we're going to have an episode as a Deus Ex retrospective, looking at all 4 games. We're going to be putting up some retro reviews of those 4 games for the anniversary of the original Deus Ex. And then on that very same day, that anniversary, we're going to have an episode on Deus Ex. And after that, I can go ahead and say this now, even though it's really far out now, we are finally going to play the game that the listeners voted on, that Zach was going to be forced to play in 2025. However, joke is on Solosi, because the game that I brought is the game that was selected. And that game is Breath of Fire 2, which I actually talked about earlier this episode. I haven't played it in a long time. I am curious to see if I can handle the encounter right now. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us, retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Blue Sky, Twitch, YouTube. We're usually RPG Fan or RPG Fan.com in those spots. We also have a Discord that you can join. We also have 2 separate shops. One of them hosted by TeePublic, where we sell t-shirts, mugs, sweaters, all that jazz. You can also support us by buying our review card book through Hyperplay RPG. These are both under the shop icon on rpgfan.com. You can get that beautiful 300-page review card book that has all those review cards that were posted to Instagram, but printed, sort of like a video game magazine. We also have 2 other fine podcasts. One is Random Encounter, where we talk about current events, random things. I will just say this right now because I get to. Coming up very soon after this episode, we're going to have a spoiler cast on Expedition 33. Aleks and I are going to be there to talk about it, along with some other people. I'm super jazzed. Freaking love that game. Oh my gosh, it's so good. If you're a retro fan, you're listening to this, you're gonna love Expedition 33.
It's true.
It's so good. Anyway, Rhythm Encounter, which is about RPG music, which should be dedicated to Expedition 33 for the next 3 months, because that soundtrack is a freaking banger. It's on the other Monday of every other Monday. You can also review us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever. We love feedback. If you want to tell me to shut up about Expedition 33, well, you should shut up first, and then you can leave us a 5-star review. Let's talk about where you can find us on social media, starting with you, Aleks.
You can just email me at alexfraniczek@gmail.com.
And Jimmy.
You can find me on Blue Sky at Turner Base Jim.
And the deputy editor, right, of Nintendo Life, Alana Hagues.
Yeah. Please find me there. I don't really use my Blue Sky anymore, but I do have one. It's Alana Hagues at Blue Sky. I just want to say, Jimmy's Blue Sky handle is amazing.
Yeah, I caught that too.
Turner based.
Yeah. I mean, it's been good. I mean, it's my favorite thing about Jimmy. There are a lot of things that I love about Jimmy, so it's a good one.
I am good with puns if I'm good at it.
Yeah, I love a good pun.
And if you want to get in touch with me, the easiest way is email, either that retro email address or zachw@rpgfan.com. I'm also occasionally on our Discord, not often, but if you DM me there, I will see it eventually. And thank the 3 of you again so much for for participating in this podcast, for bringing very different lists, for getting a lot of good variety on this list. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out overall. And thank you, listeners. Good night and good luck.